right, I guess it's time to get started. So today we'll have our colleague, Dr. Andrew Schumann. So he's going to be presenting us today for today's webinar. So let me speak a little bit about Dr. Andrew Schumann. So Dr. Schumann has a PhD from the Belarusian State University in Belarus. So he's a professor at the University of Information Technology and Management in Poland. So he's going to be discussing, among a bunch of other things, a little bit about one of the books that he has, for example, Archaeology of Logic, for example. But today he's going to be speaking particular about one particular feature of the history of logic is the importance of the interpretation of the hermeneutics of the Jewish or the Judaic Jewish Judaism. Okay, so thank you so much, and let's welcome Professor Andrew Schumann. Okay, Professor Andrew Schumann, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for introducing me, and thank you so much for interest to my talking. This talking is devoted to Judaic hermeneutics, but with an emphasis on logical inference rules. So, Judaic hermeneutics is a quite large area that includes linguistics and so on, but we will focus on logic. We can say that there is a kind of Judaic logic. It doesn't mean that there is some kind of ethnic logic. Just there is a special logical culture, and within this culture we can find some interesting inference rules and reconstruct it as a kind of logic. The tradition of Judaic hermeneutics, particularly as it evolved through the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds, constitutes one of the most sophisticated and enduring systems of legal and textual interpretation in world intellectual history. Far from being limited to scriptural commentary, this tradition functions as a form of applied logic, a culturally embedded, normatively governed, and philosophically robust system of reasoning. Central to this tradition is a body of interpretative principles known as middot, measures or rules, which serve as foundational tools of halachic, it means legal and Haggadic historical analysis and exegesis. So let us provide a criterion when we can say that there is a special logical culture. If in this culture there are some special terms to denote logical inference rules, and there is a reflection regarding these inference rules. And in the Talmud, we can find these terms to denote logical inference rules. These terms, midot, so measures, rules. And there are a lot of reflection in the Talmud about applications of this midot, about possible connections between different inference rules and so on. So we can say that there is a logic only if there are some special terms to denote logical inference rules, and there is a tradition of reflection about these rules. Furthermore, in Judaism, we can find these terms denoting inference rules which are authentic. It means original. They are not loan words from Greek, Latin. These words are authentic Judaic terms and Judaic ways of thinking which help to interpret the Torah. So, for example, if we take the German logical culture, the German logical tradition, we know that basic terms were loan words from Greek, Latin, and etc. But if we take some logical traditions in which these terms are authentic, we can say that these logical traditions are original and authentic. So in this, by this criterion, we can say that Judaic logic is a kind of logic which was established independently upon other traditions. And let us provide an example just to point out how Judaic reasoning looks like. So let us provide an example of this reasoning which are characteristic for Judaic culture. In the Muslim faith, as in Judaism, there are commandments that must be strictly observed. For example, maintaining personal hygiene is required, and if water is unavailable, one must perform the ablution, in Arabic tayammum, using fine sand. The fact that Arabs carry out ablution with fine sand for ritual purposes is also mentioned in the commentary of Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Ishaki, the preeminent commentator of the Torah and Talmud, on the following verse. Let us take this verse from Genesis. Please, Abraham says, please let a little water be brought so that you may wash your feet and rest under the tree. So Abraham sees three men, and he offers them, first of all, to wash their feet, and only then to rest under the tree. In this verse, Abraham invites, so we see that in this verse, Abraham invites three men into his tent, and before doing so, he suggests that they wash their feet. Rashi explains that Abraham assumes that they were Arabs who venerate the fine sand on their feet. Abraham strictly observes the laws of Judaism, meaning he doesn't allow any object of idolatry into his home. According to Rashi, this commentary also pertains to Lot. Since Lot was not as perfect a man as Abraham, he didn't observe the commandment preventing images of foreign gods from entering his home. This is why he first invited the visitors into his house and only afterwards offered them water to wash their feet. So, the verse. This verse belonged to Lot. Please spend the night in your servant's house and wash your feet. So the religious rites of foreigners are considered idolatry in Judaism. In Hebrew, idolatry is called avodah zarah, literally foreign worship. And therefore, the Arab ritual ablution with fine sand is, from the Jewish point of view, a form of idolatry. Rashi's commentary may seem surprising. At first glance, the explanation appears completely inaccurate. Arabs, as people, are descended from Abraham. More precisely, they are the descendants of Ishmael, who at the time of the event described was only 13 years old. Moreover, the ritual ablution with fine sand was adopted by the Arabs only after the teaching of Muhammad. It is therefore natural that Rashi, who lived in 11th century France and was familiar with Arab culture, would have been aware of these historical facts. Then, our question, why did he allow himself such an obvious historical inconsistency? And the reason is that the Haggadah, that is the narrative portion of the Bible, doesn't play a fundamental role in Judaism, for the Torah is not a historical work. The Jewish understanding of the biblical books differs significantly from the Christian one. In Judaism, the Torah constitutes a compendium of laws in which events from various periods are presented in a single, timeless order. For Rashi, therefore, what mattered was not historical, but logical coherence with the verses of the Torah. For example, Abraham first proposes that the visitors wash their feet, and only then does he invite them into his tent. Lot, on the other hand, does the opposite. He first invites them into his home and only afterward offers the washing of their feet. The difference in the sequence of actions is clear. This is our first premise. Next, we know that Lot, also Abraham's nephew, was not a perfect man, while Abraham was. This is the second premise. From this, it follows that Abraham's actions were flawless from the standpoint of halacha, that is the 613 Jewish commandments. On this basis, one must draw a conclusion that will serve as an explanation of the biblical verse. To do this, the actions of Abraham and Lot must be connected to the principles of halacha. The most fitting explanation is this. The fine sand on the feet of the visitors may have been ritually impure and therefore could have defiled Abraham's dwelling. This is why Abraham told them to wash their feet first. The best known example in Rashi's time of ritually impure sand on someone's feet came from the practice of ritual ablution among Arabs. In fact, any ritual of a foreign religion constitutes ritual impurity in Judaism. For this reason, Rashi cited precisely that example. So, for us, this example from Rashi is very significant. It shows that first, the sequence of atomic propositions, the sequence of different utterances in the Torah, in the Bible, plays a very significant role. So if we see that the sequence of different utterances is different, then it has a special meaning which should be understood. So it is just our introducing example to understand that we deal with hermeneutics. Even we introduce some inference rules. These inference rules will be deal only with hermeneutics. This hermeneutics has some evident roots in yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to ask everyone to mute your microphone so we don't interrupt Dr. Schumann's presentation, please.
Mm-hmm. We can find some roots of this Judaic hermeneutic in Mesopotamian hermeneutics. And to show these facts, we can focus first of all on history of Judeans in Babylonia. Akkadian documents provide strong evidence that many Judeans, after the Babylonian exile, became deeply integrated into Babylonian society, occupying middle and even higher level positions within its complex social and economic hierarchy. Many exiles engaged in trade, maintaining strong ties with Judah. The Hebrew Bible confirms this picture, emphasizing the continuity of contact between the Judean exiles in Babylonia and those who remained in their homeland. And there are many quotations from Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and so on about these facts. The Babylonian economy, rather than being strictly controlled by the state, created opportunities for various participants, including Jewish merchants, to engage in trade. Some Judeans bore the titles Tamkaru, merchant, or Tamkaru Shashari, royal merchant. Yet many urban families participated in commerce without official titles, demonstrating the diversity of economic roles available to Judeans. Notably, none of their documents were issued on Jewish holidays, providing further evidence of their Judean identity. Additional evidence of Jewish involvement in Babylonian society appears in land records. 11 Judeans appear in 7 documents as co-owners of agricultural plots and so on. So, what is the most important for us here at this point? That the Judean community was very well incorporated in the Babylonian community. For example, these titles like Tamkar Shashari is very, very high for the society. It is like you have some valuable papers in biggest stocks. It is very important. Why? Because Babylonia at that time was a center of world trading networks, and these titles was very high. Akkadian documents mentioned a large Jewish settlement in Babylonia called Alu Shah Yahudaya, Al-Yahudu, city of the Judeans, located near Babylon. Sometimes Al-Yahudu appears together with the names Alu Shah Nashar, city of Nashar, and Bit Nashar, house of Nashar. For example, tablet C83, a tax record, mentions a Deco official from Al-Yahudu. The settlement of Al-Yahudu was incorporated into a larger administrative unit known as Shoshanu Yudaya, meaning the unit of Judean state dependence. It was established by local authorities to streamline the collections of rents and taxes from the Judeans and to regulate their military conscriptions. However, many Jewish exiles were also resettled in central and southern Mesopotamia. In this region, toponyms such as Tel Aviv, Tel Malach, and Tel Harash, Harsa appear. For example, they are mentioned in Ezra. So, we know that the Judean community was autonomous. It means they have own judges and so on. In 539 BC, after the conquest of Babylon by King Cyrus, the Persian ruler issued a significant edict recorded in the Bible in the book of Ezra, in the first chapter. This decree allowed the Jewish people who had spent several decades in exile in Babylonia to return to their homeland, Judah, and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, which had been destroyed by the Babylonians during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II. The return was not only a religious act, but also a political one, expressing Cyrus' desire restore local religious practices and strengthen his empire by gaining the goodwill of his subjects. In his edict, Cyrus also commanded the return of the sacred vessels that had been plundered by the Assyrians during the sack of Jerusalem. In issuing this decree, the Persian king acknowledged the influence and authority of the Jewish diaspora in Babylonia over those returning to Judah, This recognition suggests that the Jewish community in Babylonia, that is, for example, in Al-Yahudu, which had flourished and developed its own institution during the exile, retained a kind of parental authority over the newly reconstituted community in Judah. Ezra, a priest and scribe, was sent by the Persian king Artaxerxes to Judah and teach the laws of God and ensure their observance. His arrival marked a pivotal moment in Jewish history, for he brought with him not only religious authority but also the legal traditions that had developed within the Babylonian diaspora. The practices and laws followed by the Jews in Babylonia had evolved during the exile and were subsequently incorporated into the system of governance of the community in Judah. One of the key aspects of this integration was the emphasis on the observance of the Torah, which became a central element of the community's identity. Ezra's effort to establish the Torah as the foundation of the law and customs of the Jewish people played a crucial role in solidifying the distinctiveness of the Jewish community, both in Judah and in the diaspora. As a result, the Jewish community in Judah increasingly adapted to the religious practices of the Babylonian diaspora, indicating a shift toward a more unified and standardized Jewish identity through the Persian Empire. So, and now some evidence of these roots in Mesopotamian hermeneutics. In the Talmud, the general term is referred as klal, and the specific term as prat. But the word klal corresponds to the Akkadian term kalu, everything or the whole, that is Hebrew kol, whereas prat is the same of parat, to separate, to divide, corresponding to the Akkadian word paraso. So we find that basic logical vocabulary in the Talmud are cognates or even loanwords from Akkadian. Perhaps cognates. It means these words had the same roots as Akkadian, but they were original. But it is for further study. In Akkadian, the term to denote the trial verdict is called dina parasu. Dina, this word is dinum. It means dina in Aramaic, din in Hebrew. It means trial. And paraso, it means divide. So the trial decision denoted by the word dina paraso means a kind of deduction, of logical deduction. We have dinum, we have laws, we have trials, and from then we should explicate some particular consequences. So we should make a separation, dina paraso. And very interesting that we have a kind of allusion to this term dina paraso in this motto from the Tractate Kiddushin 34 in Hebrew. Amar Rabbi Yochanan en lemdin min haklalot va afilu bimkom she'ene amar bochutz. In English, one does not derive general principles, halachot, heklalot, even in a place where it says, except for something. So it means our trial decisions should be a kind of prat, should be a kind of particular verdicts. They can't be general statements. Very close to this connotate of the Akkadian term dina paraso. In the legal tradition of Babylonia, a law code was to be publicly proclaimed as the main source of legality. This public presentation was commemorated by erecting stelae with official inscriptions or by carving these inscriptions on a wall. One of the most famous such stelae is the Stele of Hammurabi, containing his laws. Another example is inscriptions on the wall of the Agora in Gortyn, in Crete, which present Greek laws. The legal code was treated as a set of non-logical axioms, so some content statements, proclaimed to all by their being engraved in stone. In a similar manner, the tablets of the law, Hebrew Luchot Habrit, which according to the Torah were written by God himself, constituted an official record of the Jewish legal code engraved on stone. And the quotation. And he gave Moses, when he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the two tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. On the one hand, we see that indeed we can find Mesopotamian roots of Jewish hermeneutics, for example, cognates or even loanwords from Akkadian and so on, many allusions to Mesopotamian hermeneutics and so on, but also we should point out as follows. In Jewish tradition, the origins of studying the Torah and hermeneutical reasoning reach directly back to the period following the biblical flood. According to Talmudic and Midrashic sources, the first academy dedicated to studying and transmitting divine wisdom was established by Shem, the son of Noah, and his descendant, Eber. This early school is referred to in Rabbinic literature as Midrash of Shem and Eber. Midrash Shem Eber. And is described as a center of spiritual and intellectual formation long before the formal revelation at Sinai. It is noteworthy that the patriarch Abraham, according to Midrashic tradition, was a student of this academy. From both a religious and historical perspective, Jewish hermeneutics therefore clearly predates Mosaic law and is rooted in an unbroken chain of divine instruction extending back to the earliest post-flood generations. This tradition holds profound significance for understanding the antiquity and uniqueness of Judaism's interpretive culture. It confirms that hermeneutical reasoning is not an innovation of the post-exilic period, nor a product of Greco-Roman influence, but a deeply rooted and continuous method of engaging with revealed texts whose origins trace back to Shem, the eponymous ancestor of all Semitic peoples, including the Akkadians. In this light, the early development of interpretative principles is seen not as a human invention, but as a continuation of a divinely inspired method of understanding revelation. At the same time, acknowledging the existence of Akkadian parallels and influences in the structure and terminology of later rabbinic hermeneutics, doesn't contradict these theological perspectives. On the contrary, it enriches it. The Babylonian context, in which much of Jewish life and thought developed after the destruction of the first temple, becomes a stage of the refinement, not the invention of ancient hermeneutical traditions. This discovery of Akkadian roots within Jewish hermeneutics should therefore not be seen as undermining of authenticity of Jewish tradition. On the contrary, it can be understood as part of the providential development of Torah wisdom within the broader Semitic world. The continuity from Shem to Abraham and subsequently from the Babylonian exile to the Talmudic academies demonstrates that Jewish hermeneutics was both historically stated and theologically grounded, rooted in ancient revelation, while simultaneously open to its cultural and intellectual environment. And now, let us see this map. In this map, I pointed out all the early centers of logical teaching, all the earliest logical schools. So these schools were found only in 4 cultures. First, in Greco-Roman culture, and the center is Athens. Next, in Judaic culture. Next, in the Buddhist culture, and next in Chinese culture. Also, it is worth noting that all these cultures were established very close in a very closely period of time, from the 2nd century BC up to the 2nd century CE. So, also it is worth noting that all these early centers of inquiry and logical reflection emerged along a similar geographical band, roughly around 36 degrees north latitude. The idea of creating a map showing early schools of logic belongs to Jens Limansky. And after I draw this map, I was very surprised that we have such a mystic attitude that all these centers were located around 36 degrees of north latitude. Athens, for example, home to the earliest systematic philosophers of the Western traditions such as Peripatetics, Aristotle's students, and the Stoics, is located at 37 degrees of north. In the Rabbinic tradition, Yavne, the post-exilic center of the Tanaim, including the school of Rabbi Ishmael, lies further south of approximately 32 degrees north latitude. Moving eastward, we encounter the main centers of the Babylonian Talmudic academies of the Amoraim, Pumbedita, near present-day Fallujah in Iraq, at 34 degrees, Nehordea at roughly 34 degrees, and Sura around 32 degrees north latitude. On the Indian subcontinent, also near the 36 degrees north latitude line, there were case sites in the early development of logical thought within Gandharan Buddhism, a Greco-Buddhist synthesis. Balkh, an important Gandharan Buddhist center, is at 36 degrees north. Taxila, the famous university city where Indian and Greek thought intersected with local traditions, is at 34 degrees north. Khotan, a major city of the Silk Road linking Gandharan Buddhism and early logical tradition, is located at 37 degrees north. In ancient China, Early Moist logic was later integrated into the practices of Chinese legal scholars. Two important early centers where such integration occurred are Luoyang, 35 degrees, and Xi'an, 34 degrees. Both played a key role in the dissemination of logical, philosophical, and legal traditions. For me, it is absolutely unexplained why we have only 4 authentic logical traditions, and all these logical centers appeared at the same period of time and were located very closely to 36 degrees north latitude. First, let us explain this scientifically. Logic should not be seen as the invention of a single Greek genius, but rather as a convergent development of many ancient civilizations, each shaped by similar socio-economic conditions, expanding trade networks, and a shared human impulse to systematize reasoning. Notably, some of the earliest documented examples of correct logical inference are found not in philosophical texts, but in the legal culture of ancient Mesopotamia. This tradition provided the foundation for a sophisticated pre-capitalist cultural complex. It combined religious legal formalism with protection of private property, transparency in commercial transactions, advanced financial practices, and consistent reliance on rational reasoning. In this context, logic was not an abstract discipline, but a practice embedded in daily life, applied in contracts, court cases, and dispute resolutions, where correct reasoning and orderly thought had real economic and social consequences. The influence of this Mesopotamian pre-capitalist legal rational complex spread widely through the ancient Near East. Akkadian, as a region's lingua franca, became the preferred language of diplomacy and international trade. Over successive rises and falls of empires, from Old Babylon through the Achaemenids and later, this tradition adapted linguistically while preserving its essential structures and procedures. By the end of the first millennium BCE, we observe continuity in Babylonian-rooted legal tradition, exhibiting an exceptionally high level of sophistication in argumentation. This continuity can be traced through the comparative linguistic and performative analysis, showing that legal texts in various languages such as Akkadian, Aramaic, Old Greek, Bactrian, Sogdian, etc., follow a surprisingly similar linguistic game pattern, characterized by isomorphic speech act structures. For example, commercial agreements and contracts in these languages maintain a stable sequence of illocutionary and perlocutionary acts, revealing a common procedural standard. They typically include the following stages. First stage: specification of the date, place, and names of judges or witnesses. Second, identification of the parties involved in the matter. Third, announcement of the judgment or agreement. Fourth, taking of an oath. 5. Statements of withdrawal or dispute resolution. 6. Renunciation of further claims. 7. Declaration of penalties of non-compliance. 8. Clauses confirming or ratifying the agreement. 9. Formal signatures or seals. So, please try to answer my question. Whether it can be occasionally that such a sophisticated structure, rigid structure, repeats in different languages: Akkadian, Aramaic, Old Greek, Latin, Bactrian, and so on. Even in the contract text, possessing this structure, one can find clear and unambiguous applications of rules of inference, such as modus ponens, modus tollens, and others. Also important that in these contracts we can't find rhetoric figures, only inference rules like modus ponens, modus tollens. These forms are used even more frequently and systematically in the context of judicial proceedings, where precise reasoning and correct inference are essential conditions for rendering or judgment and resolving disputes. So we can find that there is a mature culture, original culture of this correct reasoning, which can be evaluated as logical reasoning in Mesopotamia and Babylonia. And now let us return to Judaic Hermeneutics. The founder of this hermeneutics is considered Hillel the Elder. He was one of the earliest Tanaim, the Jewish scholars who became the founders of the Talmudic tradition. Born in Babylonia, he was one of the most prominent teachers of Judaism during the time of King Herod. Hillel played a key role in the development of methods of interpreting Jewish law, particularly through the formulation of 7 hermeneutical principles known as midot. He first presented these principles to the sages of the house of Batira, and they are collected in the tractate Avot de Rabbi Natan. This principle as follows: Kal vāḥōmer, or a fortiori reasoning from the lesser to the greater, or vice versa. Gzera shava, analogy based on identical expressions. Binyan av, a general principle derived from a single case. Klal uprat, general statement followed by a particular. Prat uklal, particular statement followed by a general. Kiyotze b'makom acher, analogy from a similar case in another context. Dabar halomet mi inyano, a rule derived from context. So, explicitly, Hillel considered 7 inference rules as key rules in interpreting the Torah. Hillel's contribution to Jewish hermeneutics established an orderly approach to interpreting sacred texts, and his legacy gave rise to 2 distinct yet complementary traditions. First, the tradition of Nehunia ben Hakana and Rabbi Ishmael. This school of thought emphasized a logical and systematic approach to legal exegesis, focusing on general principles and their specific applications. Rabbi Ishmael formalized this method in his 13 hermeneutical rules, which became a foundational tool for halachic legal interpretation. The second tradition of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yosef Aglili. This approach was more expansive, aiming to extract meaning from every detail of the biblical text, including repetitions of individual words we have considered. Rabbi Eliezer systematized this method in 32 hermeneutical rules, which formed the basis for deriving Haggadic narrative theological meanings from the text under study. Despite their differences, both traditions played a crucial role in shaping rabbinic jurisprudence, providing the foundation for the later development of Talmudic scholarship. Hillel is often regarded as the creator of the logical hermeneutical principles, midot, in Judaism, because the Talmud mentions him as the first Tana to formulate these rules systematically. However, there is evidence that similar interpretive methods were in use in Judaism long before Hillel. For example, in the New Testament, These rules are frequently applied in various forms of reasoning, indicating that by the 1st century CE, they were already commonly employed in Jewish thought, which would have been possible only if the hermeneutical tradition had long been well established. One of the key hermeneutical principles, wāḥōmer, a fortiori reasoning, is used very frequently by Jesus. A striking example is found in his response to the Pharisees' objection to healing on the Sabbath. Here, Jesus applies wāḥōmer reasoning that if circumcision is permitted on the Sabbath, then all the more should healing a person be allowed. Quotation: if a man is circumcised on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses is not broken, why are you indignant with me for having healed a whole man on the Sabbath? The phrase healed a whole man can be understood broadly, not merely as a physical cure, but as a restoration of wholeness. In this reasoning, the minor premise, circumcision on the Sabbath, and the major premise, healing on the Sabbath, belong to the same category. Both involve medical acts performed on the Sabbath, which strengthens the logical validity of Jesus' argument wāḥōmer. Another example of Jesus applying Jewish hermeneutical principle is found in John. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. In Aramaic, Jesus used the words raya taba. This statement about the raya shepherd refers back to Isaiah, where God is depicted as a shepherd, Hebrew roeh. Such a connection between verses in example of the Rashava. Two the same terms which appeared at different places. We can combine these verses. A method of interpretation that links identical or similar expressions in different passages of Scripture to draw out their deeper meaning. Healer principles such as wāḥōmer and others are also evident in the writing of Paul and the other apostles. In the epistle to the Romans, Paul argues that if God demonstrated his law by sending the Messiah to die for sinners, minor premise, then all the more he will show his love to the faithful, major premise. These examples show that the rules attributed to Hillel in the Talmud were part of a broader Jewish interpretative tradition, which influenced not only the rabbinic exegesis of the Talmud, of the Tanaim, but also the reasoning present in the earliest Christian texts. The fact that the New Testament applies these familiar Jewish hermeneutical principles so extensively suggests that these methods were an integral part of Jewish religious discourse and teaching in the 1st century CE at least. It indicates that such interpretive traditions were already deeply rooted in Jewish thought long before the formal development of Rabbinic hermeneutics by Hillel. And now, let us consider other logical centers, Greco-Roman, Indian, and Chinese, and compare Judaic hermeneutics to these cultures. First, Greco-Roman culture. One of the most striking parallels can be seen in the Jewish principle called wāḥōmer, light and heavy, which is analogous to the Greco-Roman a fortiori argument. The logical meaning a fortiori is that if a given rule or principle applies in a less significant case, then all the more it should apply in a more significant case and vice versa. Aristotle. This rule Aristotle calls greater and lesser, from the greater and lesser. So even linguistically, this term is very close to the Hebrew term. For example, if even the gods don't know everything, then all the more humans don't know. For this means, If something that could may rightly belong to a being in fact doesn't belong to it, then it is obvious that it doesn't belong to one to whom it would belong less. Another example. The rhetoric argument widely used also in Roman legal reasoning, for example, by Marcus Tullius Cicero in his Topica, where he explains the principle of reasoning by comparison. Everything that is based on comparison is valid in this way. That which applies in the greater case also applies in the lesser. For example, if the boundaries are not regulated in a city, the flow of water is also not stopped, and so on. This method of reasoning shows that if a legal leniency, lenitas legis, is granted in the case of serious offense, maius, then logically it should also be granted in the case of a lesser offense, minus. Cicero develops this principle also in the De Inventione under the concepts of that which is greater and what which is lesser, quod maius et quod minus. Similarly, Marcus Fabius Quintilian, in his work Institutio Operatoria, explicitly identifies this as a form of comparative argument, ex comparativis. Just as Rashava links separate biblical passages through shared vocabulary, so too paradigma, the term of Aristotle, operates by juxtaposing similar cases, often using historical examples to illustrate general principles. Aristotle presents this mode of reasoning as follows. For example, that Doreus won a contest in which the prize is a crown, it is enough to say that he won at the Olympic Games. There is no need to add that the Olympic Games award a crown for everyone knows this. So it is enough to say just Olympic Games, winner of the Olympic Games, it means he has a crown. Here Aristotle assumes that this audience already understands that implicit connections, just as Grashava assumes that shared terms between passages indicate a deeper hidden link. Both methods rely on a shared cultural and textual knowledge base. But there are important differences of Judaic logic from Aristotle's syllogistics in applying rules distinguishing general and particular. In Jewish hermeneutics, a fundamental logical distinction is made between klal, meaning general or kind, and prat, meaning specific or particular. While Aristotle developed syllogistic reasoning, a formal system in which conclusions necessarily follow from major and minor premises, Jewish scholars emphasize an ordered sequence of general and specific concepts to extract meaning from text. This structured approach is clearly manifested in the hermeneutical principles pratu klal and klalu prat, which govern how general and specific concepts interact in biblical interpretation. According to pratu klal, when a specific case is followed by a general term, the general term expands the scope of the specific, suggesting that a broader category applies. Conversely, klalu prat holds that when a general term is followed by a specific, the interpretation is limited to the particular instance mentioned. For example, Leviticus states, you should bring an offering from the livestock, from the herd of the flock. So this translation is not correct. In Hebrew should be as follows. You should bring an offering from animals, from the herd or the flock. Here, the initial term animal represent a general category, while herd and flock specify it, excluding undomesticated animals. So it means we can bring an offering only from domesticated animals, because first, general term animal, and second, particular term herd or flock. The interpretive rules pratu klal and klalu prat thus reflects a nuanced approach to legal and theological reasoning different from Aristotle's logistics in that they prioritize contextual relationships within a textual sequence rather than rigid deductive structures. Please remember our first example from Lot and Abraham. This method closely parallels Roman legal hermeneutics, where general provisions are interpreted in light of particular cases. Consequently, the relationship between the general and the specific in Jewish interpretation shapes not only legal exegesis, but also provides a parallel to broader tradition of logical and rhetoric reasoning. Also, we can find many related rhetorical figures which almost are the same in Hebrew and in Greek or Latin. It means, on the one hand, we have four independent cultures, but on the other hand, these cultures had absolutely unexplained parallelness in terminology. So, for each figure or inference rule, we can find a counterpart in other four cultures. It is unexplained because these cultures were authentic and original. Let us compare with Indian reasoning. The principles Midot attributed to Hillel, Rabbi Ishmael, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yosef show clear conceptual and methodological similarities in Indian tradition of logic, Nyaya, hermeneutic, Mimamsa, and poetics, Alankara Shastra. Although the Jewish and Indian traditions emerge in different cultural and historical contexts, they share a common approach to reasoning, interpretation, and textual analysis. For example, wāḥōmer reasoning is a rabbinic tradition known as Kaimutika Nyaya in the Mimamsa school, is based on the same logical structure, which can be summarized as follows. What holds in a weaker case must all the more hold in a stronger case. This type of argumentation is widely employed in both hermeneutical traditions to establish a principle by comparing a less obvious case with a more obvious one. Such reasoning is commonly found in commentaries on sacred texts across various Hindu schools. One striking example is Jiva Goswami's commentary, Tika, on the Brahma Samhita, where he applies Kaimutika Nyaya to illustrate Sri Krishna's boundless mercy. Quotation. The same Bhagavan personally grants even his enemies results that are difficult for others to achieve. How much more Kimuta will he bestow upon those who desire him himself, whether out of love, karma, or among the finest selfless sages. Who else then is truly worthy of worship? In this passage, Jiva Goswami reasons that since Krishna is so merciful that he grants liberation or divine communion even to his fiercest enemies such as Shishupala, Kamsa, and Putana, he will all the more, Kimuta in Sanskrit, reward the highest fruits to those who worship him with love and devotion. This argument emphasizes Krishna's supreme compassion and the superiority of bhakti, devotional service, over all other spiritual paths. And let us compare this reasoning with Paul's epistle to the Romans. We have the same logical structure appearing in the New Testament, where Paul employs the principle of wāḥōmer. Paul's example, smaller, less expected case. Christ died for sinners. Greater, more expected case. Since he did this for sinners, how much more, in Aramaic, K'ma Hahil, will he serve those who have been reconciled with him? Similarly, Jiva Goswami's argument follows the same pattern. Smaller, less expected case. Krishna grants liberation or divine companionship even to his enemies. Greater, more expected case. Since he bestows such great grace, even upon his enemies, how much more in Sanskrit, kaimuti kanyaya, must he reward his poor devotees who cultivate love and service toward him. So we see that the structure is absolutely identical of both reasoning. A form of abductive reasoning in Indian philosophy is the technique Arthapati, known in the Mimamsa tradition as presumption or supposition. This method of inference relies on the necessity of accepting an unobserved fact in order to reconcile apparently contradictory observations. In counterpart, in Rabbinic hermeneutics is found in the principles umedana, meaning estimation of probability from Sanhedrin, and hazaka, meaning presumption, Mishnah Gittin 3.3. A classic example of Arthapati is the statement, if Devadatta fasts, yet still gains weight, he must be eating at night. Here we have two explicit premises. Devadatta doesn't eat during the day, Devadatta remains overweight. From this, we inevitably infer that he must be eating at night. Without such presumption, the given premises would contradict the observed reality. A similar type of abductive reasoning is found in the Talmud tractate Baba Batra 24a, which reflects the concept of umedana and hazaka. This passage concerns a case of which blood is found in the cervical canal and there is uncertainty as to whether it is menstrual blood or not. In this context, the principles of umedana and hazaka are used to make a logical presumption based on experience. Also, it is not certain that the blood is menstrual. The Talmud assumes with a high degree of probability that it originates from the uterus, since the cervical canal is the primary passage for menstrual blood. This presumption is based on the nature of the blood and its location. So we see that also the same structure of reasoning. And now Chinese philosophy, some counterparts in the Chinese tradition of reasoning. The logic of Judaic, Greco-Roman, and Indian thought also find echoes in classical Chinese philosophy, suggesting the existence of a shared Eurasian current of logical reasoning. A particularly striking example is the parallel between wāḥōmer, a fortiori, in Rabbinic hermeneutics, and tuilei, class extension by analogy, in classical Chinese philosophy. Structurally, both modes of reasoning follow the same inferential path. A minor premise. If the less significant case is true, major premise, all the more significant case is true. In both traditions, reasoning by analogy relies on a proportional relationships between cases. The principle of judgment that applies in one case necessarily applies to another, stronger case. In Chinese philosophy, tuilei was a central method for extending knowledge, particularly emphasized in Moist reasoning. In his canon, quotation, take according to classes by analogy, give according to classes by analogy. Take according to classes refers to the inductive process, and give according to classes denotes the deductive or projective application of these principles to new, unknown, or broader context. A typical example might be, if the law against theft applies to an ordinary citizen, minor case, then all the more it should apply to the ruler, major case, since the moral responsibility of the ruler is much greater. This practical orientation of Chinese discourse makes it closer to applications in Paul's writings and in Vaishnava commentaries such as Jiva Goswami we have considered. For Chinese philosophy, reasoning was inseparably linked to moral practice. It serves as means of universalizing care and codifying just governance. A classic example of this reasoning appears in Meng Zi, where Mencius, addressing King Xuan, who felt pity for an ox being led to sacrifice. If the king can't bear the suffering of the ox, minor case, how can he remain indifferent to the suffering of his people, major case? This is an unmistakable example of one-of-theory structure, so presented rhetorically rather than syllogistically. Thus, to relay in Chinese thought functions as universalizing bridge between observed particulars and their ideal norms. And now let us try to answer the question. So, how we can explain that different terminology which have no traces of learning, different terminology existed absolutely in parallel in these four cultures. So even we can translate some Greek logical treatises in Hebrew, in Sanskrit, in Chinese, because we have already some terms which are counterparts for these Greek terms, for example, of Aristotle. And let us return to this picture. It is, for me, it is, as I've said, an unexplained phenomena. Why we can find only in this location 36 degrees of north latitude and nowhere more these logical schools. For me, it is a kind of task for some future studies. Thank you for your attention, and now maybe some questions.
Thanks so much, Dr. Schumann, for your presentation. That was very interesting to know about all of those historical pieces of information. We are, in the meantime, I appreciate you guys' questions. So there are ways in which you can do that. You can either raise your hand. You can also use the feature in the chat to leave your question if you don't want to speak. In the meantime, while you prepare for your questions, our colleague, let me see him. Our colleague Ion is going to be speaking about a call for papers, right? So our group of logical religion could be of a very good contribution of a volume that Ioannis is preparing, and he has a session on logic and religion, and you guys are welcome for submissions. Please, Ioannis, can you speak more about this? Go ahead.
Okay, let's start with the volume dedicated to Jean-Yves Béziot. Maybe I will share.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Do you see? No, you don't share. We need.
By the way, while Ioannis is preparing for his slides, just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, can you guys raise your hand if you have questions for Dr. Schumann's presentation, as well? We'll leave us the questions in the chat. And as soon as Ioannis is done with his call for papers, we'll be back to those questions, okay?
Okay, yeah. Okay, do you see that now?
I think it's loading. Let's wait. Okay, we can see that now.
Okay, In 15 January of this year, Jean-Yves Béziot reached his 16th years, so he's now 60 years old, and we decided to publish a volume dedicated to his birthday. There were other volumes earlier dedicated to his 15th birthday. So we started preparing this. We created a call. The response was very positive, and we have gathered about 100 papers. So the volume will be expanded to 3 volumes. And the project will continue during the next year, during 2026. And so there is time to submit more papers if you wish. But I would like to invite you to prepare some section of papers, because in the first volume, for example, will be a section on universal logic, a section on non-classical logic, a section on history of logic, philosophy of logic, etc. So maybe we can gather, for example, 5, 10, I don't know how many, papers for a section on logic and religion. And to be maybe in the 3rd volume, because the second volume will start processing after the new year. So you have time to submit for the second volume if you like, but maybe we can gather a section of papers for the 3rd volume. There's no deadline announced yet for the 3rd volume, so you are free to prepare and to discuss possible submissions. So this was my announcement.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, Ioannis. That was very interesting. As you see, if you guys have any questions for me or Ioannis, reach out to me. I'll also leave, please, Ioannis, if you could leave your email so you can interact with me later. That will be helpful. Appreciate it.
And I will send the link, because in the link there are the templates for the papers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Submit to Word or to LaTeX, etc. So
thank you so much. Now let's be back to Dr. Schumann's presentation. Please, those who have any questions about Dr. Schumann's presentation, please raise your hand. Alexei, go ahead, please.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, Zoom cannot detect my camera, so I will
That's
speak.
all right. That's all right.
My question is, well, as I understand, we call Aristotle the founder of logic. For me, it's mainly because Aristotle operated with variables. So variables are the key point to distinguish logic or logical forms from reasoning. The traditions you discussed in your talk, do they show the use of variables in the development of logic systems, whatever. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. Mainly, I agree that Aristotle is a very significant figure in the history of logic. First of all, since his syllogistic is only one system which can be well formalized by means of modern logic. For example, in formalizing Stoic reasoning, we have some problems. In formalizing Nyayo logic, we have some problems because this reasoning are quite contextual and are rooted more in epistemology. But another point, very significant, we ascribe many treatises to the figure of Aristotle, but we should remember that his treatises were published about 200 years after his death. So, and linguistically, if you know Old Greek and can compare, for example, his rhetoric with other his treatises, you can find that linguistically these treatises are very different. So, surely that many texts ascribed to Aristotle were written by a different time, by different people, evidently by his students, and so on. And very interesting that the same problem is with Moses. Moses wrote his canon, and this canon includes the so-called dialectical chapters. Dialectical chapters absolutely have some logical meaning. It means inference rules, how we can apply them, and so on. But also the same problem that linguistically these dialectical chapters were written surely after the death of Moses. So about the 3rd century BCE. A very similar situation with Aristotle. I think logic can't be treated as a product of one genius. So logic is a product of community and communities of people, of pupils, and so on. And Aristotle surely didn't write these treatises which are ascribed to him because they were edited after his death. We know that the title of the books, Metaphysics, is not an authentic title of these books, and so on.
Can I ask?
Go ahead.
My question was not about priority. My question was, do you distinguish logic from reasoning? I do. For me, logic is the science about forms where reasoning is implemented. That's why the concept of a variable is important. Propositional variable, functional variable, other variables, otherwise we cannot quantify, and quantification is important. So that's the simple question. Do you distinguish reasoning and between, if find any distinction between reasoning and logic?
Yes, we should differ logical inferences, entanglements from only reasoning. I agree. In my talking, I presented more widely. In my opinion, it is more interesting that not only inference rules, but even some rhetoric figures are very similar. So we have in my opinion, this logical culture in the narrow meaning, as you said, is possible only if there is a very well developed this culture of just reasoning. So not only these poor logical investigations, but if we focus on poor logical investigations, also we can trace them in Indian logic. For example, I've published a paper in which I show that the well-known treatise of Dharmakirti Nyaya-Bindu repeats all the basic inference rules from the Stoic logic. It means modus ponens, modus tollens, modus tollenda ponens, modus ponenda tollens, and celerent and barbara. So also we can find this core, this law about very narrow logical reasoning, and in the Talmud also. But the emphasis in ancient these logical cultures was rather on analogical reasoning. And in my opinion, this shows that narrow logical investigations can be carried out only if we have these wide logical rhetoric cultures.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so while if people don't have any more questions, so we wanted to thank you, Dr. Schumann, for his presentation. But in the meantime, if there's still anyone who still wants to ask something before we finish, I want to let you guys know that we have our next session of the Logical Religion webinar this upcoming December 18th. So if you recall, we are having those, in addition to the webinar, these online roundtables organized by Dr. Silvestre, one of the founding fathers of this Logical Religion group, along with Janice Bizier. So the next webinar is going to take part with Dr. Ricardo Silvestre's online roundtable, in which he's presenting the main results of his own project from his Templeton project. So he was awarded with this Templeton project 3 years ago. So he's finishing the project with these roundtables. Now, last time, for the reasons of the logistics, we had the limitations of leaving the roundtable in Portuguese. We also, as part of his project, we're also going to have another one in Portuguese, but the next one is in English. So you guys are welcome to attend. So it's going to be about the conception of ultimate reality in Vedanta traditions. Again, that's December 18th. I'm going to update the website accordingly. And I hope to see you guys over there. Any more questions to Dr. Schumann, please? Anyone else? So Dr. Schumann, thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate your willingness to speak for our group. Thank you so much. And thank you guys as well for your attendance. Thank you so much. See you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.